Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's VIN-dow with Robert Holmeshead. Good Easter weekend to you, Bob.
It's Easter? You're kidding
It's
me.
Easter.
That means it's Good Friday tomorrow. We're in trouble, man, because we got a pile of cars, and I got the need to sell them, baby. You know what I mean?
And it's a stat holiday up here in Canada, so it's shut down. It's just like Christmas Day.
Please, I've heard enough. I can't listen to it. I ain't going to be able to sleep tonight because I got to sell cars.
Got it. But speaking of selling cars, one of the items we always see on all the auctions is the AutoGrades. And I was kind of hoping we could dive into that today and pick your brain on your thoughts on it. I know there's some interesting, just interesting things about the AutoGrade in general. How it was formed, why it happened, the origins of it, the faults, the positives. We could spend a lot of time on this, so let's just dive right in.
I hope I can make some sense, Sean. It's actually an interesting topic that over time it continues to evolve. Because younger people were in the business that weren't around when it first started and how it started or why it started, including the people that administrate it. It's like an interesting thing. Not that anybody cares, but I think we got some background color to help everybody understand a little bit about what it is. The CRs actually started, 20 or 30 years before CR started, and that was when a proud seller actually wrote on the window of the car, local one owner, new Lexus trade, no paintwork, never smoked in, spare ain't never been down, it's got XYZ navigation, whatever options, and so forth. And what that really was a seller that's guaranteeing whatever they believed that they touched it, smelled it, bought it, put their money up. In other words, they're writing a CR on the window of the car, and what that really essentially boiled down to is trust between a buyer and a seller, the development of the pedigree of the car, where it came from. You're not buying some rental slug that somebody put, fake wire wheels on, that put a pinstripe on it and a vinyl top, and now we're passing it off like it's got some sort of pedigree, right? So next thing you know, we have what you would call simulcast. So when Manheim started doing the simulcast thing, it was about the same time that OVE first started, right? It was like a new technology taking its place in the remarketing business, et cetera. And, it was like a thing. And, I remember distinctly when we first sold our first cars, it happened in Manheim, Pennsylvania. It's where actually Manheim's experiment with Greg Gaiman was the GM at the time, actually experimented. Greg was standing in lane 2 as, we're watching us sell, let's say, whatever year Omega it was, right? And I looked down, I'm saying to myself, first of all, there were no pictures, there was no nothing. Somebody's just bidding based on trust. They need the car. Dealers in Connecticut needs the car. He's going to bid the car, right? So this is a very interesting aspect of how this $50 fee got charged. I said, Greg, do me a favor. I'm screaming at him when I'm standing on the auction block. Charge me an extra $50 selling that car. And he looks at me like I'm cross-eyed, like I'm mentally retarded, which, it's very possible based on his past experience with me. However, I'm deadly serious because all I could picture is this cat that bought this car in Connecticut is going to get the car and piss and moan because the spare tire has 10 pounds of pressure as opposed to 32 pounds of pressure, right? And the $50, from my naive perspective, and obviously autistic perspective, right? Not altruistic, but autistic perspective, was that the auction would do the right thing and put that $50 in a pool. So when somebody says there's a fart in the trunk, the auction would immediately dig into the coffer. It didn't cost them a penny to dig in the seller's coffer of this account to make the buyer feel good. Now all of a sudden, when they first started simulcast, well, this will never be like anything important. It'll only ever be 5 or 10% of our business if we scale. And from my perspective, immediately, and this is decades and decades ago, I felt, no, you're wrong. This will really, truly be the only way we're going to sell cars. Because for dealers to be driving 5 hours one direction, walk through 300 acres of cars, write down 3 numbers, miss 2 of them because obviously you're running a track meet to get to the next lane to bid on something. It's never going to scale. It's never going to work. It's not efficient. It won't work. So the theory of taking the $50 out of the check, that's where it came from. Now, what happened was at that time it was Keith Williams, who was the general or the regional manager, and of course their job is to increase profits by 14% per quarter, otherwise they're worthless, right? This becomes like a profit center. So Greg, in his, I think, sincerity, said, "Jesus Christ, that's a good idea." Well, he didn't say that because he's a Christian, but that's a great idea. Now, when he brings it to the regional manager, Keith, who then would obviously ultimately take his place as the general manager, they saw it as a profit center. The exact same thing occurred with Title Attached when Warren Young was the originally owned Manheim and Bordentown. And, "Hey, Warren, why do you charge me extra? Because I'm not getting paid for a car because I don't have the title. It doesn't cost you anything." And the answer to me was, "Well, because we can, Bob. So where's that $15 go? The title of that goes in their pocket. It has no." I'm not complaining about things. I'm just stating historical, absolute fact. You follow me? Now that we have this $50 going, and I'm saying, "Well, Jesus Christ," the guy called back and he said, "There's like a fart in the back seat of this car. Take it out. He wants $200. Give him the money." Now, of course they didn't. And of course we did. And because you ain't happy with the car, you ain't allowed to have the bitch. That's always what we've said and actually done. We just take more money out of our pocket. And the idea of making this AutoGrade something that people could trust goes in a different direction. Now, next in this order of events, right? In 1996, when leasing started, and then we got the new building in 2000, and of course, Manheim Auto Auction was built specifically on consigners that got their cars ready, that stood behind their cars, and brought more money than they did anyplace else in the country, as a matter of fact. Okay, now when commercial accounts, lease cars start coming in, the next thing you know, it's a great idea. We're going to bring them to Manheim. Now, picture this. You see, when it's dealers that own their cars with skin in the game, are selling their cars with honor, and in other words, reputation, etc. Now you have commercial sellers who are not even remotely connected to their vehicles. It's an employee, doesn't really know much about the automobile industry, is tasked the job of getting rid of their necessity sellers. They have to get rid of their cars. What would you do in order to do that? Now, simulcast is coming along, right? We're selling 2-3%. I'm selling 15% of our cars in simulcast, right? And next thing you know, it's the commercial. What do you do next? Because now we build a recon center, right? Now the recon center can only stay in business and be productive, increasing profits on a quarterly basis, is if you're able to find a way to create the activity to make the profit, right? And what we would do is we would take sellers, commercial sellers, I won't name whoever they might be, everybody already knows who they are, and gaff them, showing them the evidence that if it was not a 2.2 and it was a 4.1, they would get X amount of return, and therefore, based on how much it costs to get it to be a 4.1, it only costs you $400, but you get $1,500 more in return. They obviously are easily able to convince non-skin in the game sellers to do this. Now, what that does is then the system itself is built to value a current model year car with cosmoline still on the paint, plastic on the paint, exactly the same way that you're valuing a 1999 or doing a condition report on 1999 with 27,000 miles. It happens to be the best one in the world, but if you use the exact same characteristics of a CR against those two vehicles with no compensation for age, factory, build. In other words, a 99, you touch the edge of the hood, and it was definitely repainted, even though it was never repainted. In other words, and we're superseding the characteristics of the CR, and that 2.2 could be the best one you ever seen in your life. Now, here's the problem, and where this actually, over time, has devolved. Obviously, today there is no more commercial business. We still use the same system that values or considers a 10-year-old or a 20-year-old car, or a ding that's the size of a peanut that comes out in 3 seconds with any $40 PDR guy, and we smash that car into oblivion to make it a worthless pile of dog crap, or make it look like any other rental car, even though it's not. Now, we're not doing anybody a service by doing this, because what we're doing, because of software that says, if it's a 3.5, you can't bid on the car. Well, you can make any car a 3.5 by 2 or 3 items that really don't have any relevance whatsoever to the value of the car, and turn it into junk where nobody has the ability to do their proxy bids or buy the car, right? And what you wind up with is then simultaneously, if you look at various auctions, all of them have used the same system, but of course it's not the same system. It's how they write them and who writes them and what day of the week it is that they're writing them and who to write them for. Everything comes out differently. It's all different. Now, what you've wound up with is, we started with trust, local one owner, new car trade, no paintwork, never smoked in, spare ain't never been down, bitch new. Okay, that's where we start. And you also then can refer to the person that wrote on that window to say, the spare was down. The spare really was down, right? And at that moment, you've actually captured the seller and a buyer in a circumstance where you can come to a conclusion. Let me get you a new spare. Better than that, you're not allowed to own the car because the spare was down for 4 miles, and therefore my CR was incorrect. Trust. You see what I'm saying? In this case, the way we do it today, you can look at a drugstore delivery van at XYZ auction, smashed down the side, written, all over the place, bumpers hanging off, 2 wheels like in the trunk of the car and sitting on its frame, and it's a 2.2. It's a 2.2. Now that's fine. We're counting that as a 2.2. But yet, see, this is where, if you're a buyer, you're not going to like the story. We get condition reports done, and, it happens to be a car with no paint, never smoked in, and a trade-in. Somebody had to kiss somebody's balls for 3 days to buy, to pinch it, to put it into the general market where you have an opportunity to buy something other than a junk rental, remade hog that flunked the shop. And it's a 2.2, you see? Now, it's not a drugstore delivery van. It really is like something pretty special. And you really are disabling. First, you're mutilating the value of the car for the person that actually goes out with her checkbook and writes a check and drags it to the market to sell it in an open, free, aggregated market of critical mass buyers to get critical mass value, best end user value. And we've crippled that because, you got to remember another thing, Shawnee. There's 50 different platforms. Each one has their own CR or version of CR. And of course, we're saying they're all the same CR when it's not. You have to be you have a doctorate in the CRology to discern who it is, who wrote it, where it was, what the intent, what kind of seller is it, who is the seller, can I trust the seller or not, if the CR is not correct. When you stop and think about it, that causes brain pudding. In other words, it like you put your brain into a mixer and turned it on high and walked away and came back. And then you're going to sit there and spend your money, if it is your money, or your boss's money, if it is his money, and come out with a amiable result, right? Obviously, nobody would ever want to hear my theory. I say go back to writing on the windows. Let the owner of the car write on the windows, right? Because that'll never happen. But let a seller be the person that is on the carpet if whatever the CR says isn't correct. Because now, obviously, that wouldn't work with commercial accounts, because commercial accounts, they're too big and they're too fancy, even though the guy that actually is in charge of it wouldn't know a car if it ran over top of him, put a tattoo on his head, wouldn't have a clue what it is. But the auctions have, all basically, I don't want to say auctions, remarketing platforms have all catered to the commercial seller, because theoretically they have the most cars, and of course nobody charges them any money to sell because without cars, an auction doesn't function. So they'll do anything to get the cars, and then they'll do anything to keep the seller, the person, the employee happy that they're selling the cars for. And what we've done in all of this set of circumstances, we forgot all about who actually is the auction. It's basically used car dealers. It could be a franchise dealer, but you're a used car dealer, and then it's basically hustlers, people that are got the skill or the ability, the will to go out and wrangle up cars, get them ready, and put them in a marketplace with the theory that you're going to make profit. Not always do you make profit. Frequently, you don't make profit. But as a professional, to represent your stuff in a way that is beneficial for somebody who needs to buy cars, right? And my feeling is the seller is really here's another problem with the CR. See, you got a 10-day window, you got a 2-day window, you got 1 hour this, the other, and the guy that bought your cars that's in Minnesota or in like Arizona or wherever, because you got a lot of cars and they like your cars and they buy them and they bring them home, and they sell them, even though it cost them $3,200 to get the car there, they sell them and they like them, they want to come back again, right? If for some reason, like in that set of circumstances, they find that they can't trust something. In other words, they bought it. It took them 12 days to get the car there, so it's outside of arbitration rules. Then they get it there, and there is a fart in the trunk. Wasn't marked properly on the CR, and they don't have any resolution. They can't call the auction because the auction says, "Whoops, I'm sorry, you're outside the date," and they're either intimidated or don't have the inclination to call the seller, or don't even care, because I think today there's a lot of people that don't stop and think about who that seller is, what the reputation is. Where do those cars come from? Are they catfish coming out of muddy creeks, or are they trout coming out of a Lexus trade-in? You understand? In other words, there's a difference between chicken salad and chicken poop. And only a really, truly astute buyer would understand that. And they would only understand it because they paid too much for something that came out of freshwater, a trout, brought it home, and sold it instantly, even if it was too much, which means it wasn't too much. It might be too little. You dig? Because when you compare it to some slug that you bought that came out of mud, right, got shined up a little bit, CR said the same thing, a 4.1. But you get it home and everybody's walking in circles around it. You can't get nobody to crack the door open until you get a tractor trailer to run it over to open the door up. And all of a sudden, an astute buyer would actually start to add 1 plus 1 equals 2. There is no need for trigonometry, et cetera. Over time, I think it starts to make sense. So to start with your question, Shawnee, what about the AutoGrade system? If we don't consider all of how it evolved, where it came from, what it is today, how it's used today, it's very difficult just to point and say, what is AutoGrade? What does that mean? Well, you have to basically, in my estimation, as somebody who's really truly sold more cars than any human being that's ever lived at auction that you owned, you have to unpack all of the things that go around it. And for a guy that's going to buy 40 cars tomorrow, you can't just sit there and start doing this philosophical, nonsensical, like pontificating, right? But if you consider it as you move through your weekly, monthly, annual process of how and why you do things, I have a funny feeling it can be beneficial to understand history, to understand origins, to understand, like people's responsibility to do certain things. It's really difficult if you're an auction. You hired 150 people to go do CRs. You ought to do the same way. Got to do the same thing and same things. They're not thinking about, like all the things we're talking about. They're never going to do that. It's just physically impossible for that to occur. And it's why I believe there will never be, in the way that CRs are written today, and in the volume that they're written, and the volumes of data that goes into a cave. When you think about it, and an auction is going to represent 6,000 cars tomorrow, at least 50% of that data that's collected will never be used for anything ever again. So it's all hurry up, get it done, and then when you're done, it's sold, didn't sell, and it just goes into a void, never to be seen or used again, right? It's like a tremendous amount of work for theoretically a little return. And so you're saying, well, geez, Bob, what's the alternative? It's what I've always said it is: a platform that enables not a seller disclosure, but a seller guarantee. Seller guaranteed. Forget the seller disclosure part. If you ain't willing to do the seller guarantee, then don't try to do your own CR that somebody could actually trust. That to me is the solution. Now, when Hertz or Avis is selling their cars back into the market, or some XYZ bank that wouldn't know the difference about a CR other than the fact that they paid an extra $1,100 to recon their car, they can make the CR move 2 points. No, they're not going to do that because, first of all, they're not professionals at what they do. They're in a different business. They lend money. They get stuck with cars. They got to go sell them. It's got nothing to do with somebody who does this as a profession. Does any of that make sense to you, Sean?
There's a lot to unpack there, Bob.
I put you to sleep.
There's a lot to unpack. It's absolutely fascinating.
Did I put you to sleep, Sean? No.
No, I am sensors ago. It's just fascinating stuff. So, yeah, I think spelling out how the basis that it came out you're right. It's super important, and going forward, will that ever happen? Will a seller ever say, we stand behind this? No,
we do it every day, but it's not done from a platform standpoint. From a platform standpoint, in my estimation, if it's a seller guarantee, there's no question in my mind, especially if you're going to guarantee somebody that has the will and the inclination to buy cars from East Jabip. They're buying cars. They're on Jupiter. They want to buy your car. It's going to take them an extra 30 minutes to get the car there. Would you guarantee it? Absolutely, I'd guarantee it. No questions asked. You follow me? Because it's a little bit different than somebody that's right around the corner that's got a driver with them, and the hammer goes down 13 minutes later. It's sitting in their lot. It's a little different. You know what I mean? If it's really ever going to scale to the point where I believe it has to go, I think that would be an evolutionary move that legitimate people would absolutely not only do, but I think buyers would accept with open arms, if I'm not mistaken. The whole idea of a third party talking about my car is a brain fart. You don't need a third party. If I'm lying, then you ain't buying. It's just that simple. If that were the case, I think the entity, in other words, the facilitator, would lower their cost dramatically. I think the conversion rate would go up dramatically, and I think the arbitration would be a much cleaner circumstance, if I'm not mistaken. And if you finally find out that I don't want to sell you cars, or you don't want to buy cars from me, that makes it a lot easier for everybody also, don't it?
You painted a pretty cool picture. I'd love to see it.
All right, my friend.
Thank you, Bob.
I appreciate it. Hopefully, everybody will be snoring halfway through it anyway. See you later.